This may look like a mass of heather and not much more, but this expanse of peatland in North Wales is an invaluable ecosystem, and it offers a home and breeding ground for all kinds of life. A Welsh longhouse sits on the edge of this extensive area of blanket bog just within the Snowdonia National Park. Blanket bogs are one of the most important habitats found in Wales, if not globally. They accumulate due to the very slow rate at which plant material decomposes in waterlogged areas, and they are in fact completely rainwater fed. Heather and the fluffy white-headed cotton grasses often cover this wild landscape. Clyde Holmes, an eco-poet, lived up in this remote place for over 40 years. In this time, he built up an intimate knowledge of the landscape and wildlife that surrounded him. The diaries he left behind revealed his passion for this environment. As a result of his remarkable observational skills, he consistently documented subtle changes to the natural world over many years in the valley he knew so well. He believed there is no difference between nature outsiders and insiders, and he once said, "Living in a remote rural place is not an escape or retreat, but a way of experiencing our relation to the planet, an escape to reality, not from it." We met Rhodri Dafydd up at the poet's old home. He works here on the Mignant Special Area of Conservation and also walks the moors in his own time, as he is so fond of this landscape.
I mean, personally, I've always had an interest in wild places, really, and mountaintops and moorlands and bogs and mires are, the epitome of that in Britain, I suppose. It's well known that we've got no real wild habitats left, really. Everything we see really has been influenced to some degree by man. In the past, of course, they'd be covered by trees and they're all gone now. But I think it's just the general feeling that you get on an open area of blanket bog. You really do feel like you are in the closest thing to wilderness as you can imagine, really. And it's just the wide openness of it, even though I'm fortunate enough to be working on these protected sites, I still end up in my own time. I go up, particularly to look at the birds, really. In some areas of the Mignant site here, we've got peat down to kind of 8, 9, even 10 metres in depth. And when you think that peat forms at 1 millimetre a year on average, every metre you've got 1,000 years of history. So in some areas of this site, especially the wetter ones, we've got the full kind of history of vegetation development in Wales since the last ice age, which is quite interesting.
Due to this being such a specialised habitat, any damage done to it can be irreversible. In good condition, peatlands can act as carbon sinks, helping in our fight against global warming. But if damaged, they have the opposite effect, releasing huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. Peat bogs face many threats. Drainage is a major one. Other negative impacts include peat erosion and extraction, afforestation projects, and burning.
As a result of repeated burning, what you end up with is then a highly modified bog where you've lost all the, you could say, more important peat-forming species. What's great about these kind of you might say unmodified bogs is the kind of diversity of life that you've got in them, not just the mosses themselves, but lots of the kind of maybe flowering plants that you wouldn't really tend to notice because they're so small, but the diversity is there if you kind of look at your feet really and look at what's underneath it. Blanket bugs are quite a fragile habitat really, because obviously with the mosses underneath it's kind of very spongy, it's very waterlogged. Of course you've got lots of bog pools, what they call them, and they'll be full of like pioneering species of sphagnum.
Sphagnum mosses are one of the main peat-forming plants, and they enrich the moorland with their vibrant colours throughout every season. One extraordinary plant you will come across in boggy areas is the insect-eating sundew. Because of the nutrient-poor environment it inhabits, it has adapted a carnivorous way of life, trapping insects who come to a sticky end. The pools are teeming with an array of life above and below the water. These wetter areas provide an ideal breeding habitat for dragonflies and damselflies. After passing the larval stage underwater, they usually emerge early in the morning and the larval skins are discarded on plants close to the water's edge. You can watch these extraordinary insects on warm sunny days when they make the most of their short adult lifespan. Not that many obvious changes have taken place up here, but 20 years ago an area of forestry was planted. Conifer plantations have their own eerie beauty when you step inside them. Unfortunately, these afforestation projects in the uplands can have a negative impact on the surrounding environment.
Obviously at one time maybe so much value wasn't placed on areas of bog, and some foresters maybe thought, oh, what better place to plant conifers. With that came a lot of negative impacts in terms of, well, obviously the drainage first of all, to be able to plant up the areas. Once they're planted, the conifers tend to still dry out the peat because they're basically transpirating so much water from what is essentially a wetland habitat, and it's going straight up into the atmosphere. What you end up with in the end is a really dense plantation which is still drying out the peat body, which possibly harbours species such as foxes and crows, really, that will then predate especially ground nesting birds. So you're talking about the harriers and things like curlew, which used to nest in numbers in the uplands.
During the first 20 years of Clyde Holmes' life up here on the Mignite, the curlews would always return to nest near the house. Out of many encounters with these beautiful birds, this poem, Curlew's Nest, was born. Must be near the farmhouse. For weeks now he gasps with a wheezy scream. Above my head his curved bill, an ominous sabred silhouette. Then one spring after this forestry was planted, the curlews failed to return to the area. There has been a huge decline in curlew numbers in recent decades. Curlews are our largest wading birds, and they were once a common sight in spring and summer throughout the Welsh uplands, where they would return from the coast to breed. Now, one of the last strongholds for them is on an area of peatland, Mynydd Hiraethog in northwest Wales. A good mixture of wetlands scattered amongst pastures remains here. You may also be lucky enough to see the declining large heath butterfly on this moorland. Curlews face a great deal of predation in the uplands during the breeding season. Gulls hang around looking for a meal. Here a curlew is lucky to escape a peregrine attack. A red kite's presence arouses the curlew's attention. They always keep a good lookout. Predation is just one of the pressures on curlews. Dave Elliott knows the area well and helped us gain some understanding of what habitat curlews like and why they may be on the brink of extinction in Wales.
The RSPB carried out a survey across the whole of Wales in 2006. That showed a decline of about 80% since the 1993 survey, which is phenomenal. And they have gone from all altitudes and all sort of habitat types. Curlews are birds that like an open landscape, like a big wide open view, and they're generally they don't like to be too close to trees. Older farmers here say there were many more curlews in this area when they were younger, and there are historical records of them being much more when the moorland was managed as a grouse shoot, or parts of it were, and when perhaps there was more grazing going on up there. There's been a reduction in the grazing on the open moor, which has made it perhaps more uniform. And it seems to be that they do like this patchwork that we've got in this area and other areas similar to it. The one thing about this area here is that it's got a wide open landscape. It's a gently sloping, wide open valley going gradually up onto a big upland plateau on both sides. Having that balance, that mixture of the damp, slightly taller vegetation that they want to nest in and that chicks can easily move through, and then the shorter pastures nearby, seems to be a combination we've got still in a widespread way across this particular landscape. Maybe that's gone from some of the other uplands. Without farmers, these birds have got no future really. We rely on farmers to provide the right conditions.
We met one farmer over at Mynydd Hiraethog who has a true love of wildlife. He's also working with the RSPB to help declining birds in the uplands.
Well, I was born here in 1940 and I took over the farm from my father in 1964, and I farmed that until last year. My son took the farm over last year, and I'm coming here every day. That's the same. I've seen a lot of change since when I started farming in 1964. There were more birds then than much more than now. More curlews, more everything. The curlews come before the lapwing. They sing before the lapwing, and they come around end of January. They can hear them calling end of January, but they come up in middle of March to nest.
Peat bogs are vivid places. The wildness, the space, and the incredible diversity of life they support is unique. The curlew decline is only one example of how fragile the balance between humans and nature is, and how important it is for people to connect with their environment and to try to preserve it.
I think it's really important that we have these places to go out and to breathe and to remember that we're part of this planet, really. I think the Blanket Bog is as close an area to heaven as you get on Earth, I think, in my opinion.
All sorts of things that people can do, but the thing to do is that we all need to pull together. And it's not just down to the farmers on this farm or that farm, or the people in that village, or the RSPB or the National Trust, or whoever it is. Everybody needs to play their part, and that's, I think, the way the way forward that we've got.
If this wasn't a bog, there wouldn't be any frog. You had to stop and listen.
When I step out of his circled territory, his sound magically ceases. I am stunned by silence, freed from his anxiety.